this panel is about sort of a lot of things, really. We kind of have a general sort of overview, which is the path to transparency, digital transformation across the supply path. But we were talking about a lot of stuff today, like transparency, SPO, a lot of things like that. But I want to talk first of an overall picture of where we are right now. I'm just trying to figure out, I sit there sometimes, as I muse the ad tech world, I wonder to myself, how did we get here? How did the breakdown of trust start with this ecosystem, right? We try and mark ourselves with high levels of transparency and targeting and measurement and all the rest, but digital seems to be getting a really hard time when TV can get away with panels. 3 lads watching TV in Scotland constitutes 60 million people, get all the sped. So how does that, why are we in this situation, Laura?
I think you bring up a good point to start with. So, all the other mediums don't have this problem. Like, we still think of digital out of home. We've got people running around with cameras saying, no, it definitely ran. And we trust that, and we don't have any issue with that. But yet, digital gets tarnished with this issue with trust and transparency. I think a lot of people have brought it up today, and I really do believe that digital just absolutely boomed. It grew so quickly, and we're still seeing that growth today. And I think sometimes when we grow so quickly, out of that comes distrust. There's so many acronyms, there's so many ad tech players, it's really mixed. And that can breed distrust sometimes. But there's also distrust in many different layers. So the supply side, the buy side, and if we look at just, say, the campaign piece on its own, there's also some distrust just in the execution of the campaign. So did the ad actually get the right frequency capping? Or was I just spamming a whole lot of consumers? Was it safe? Did I get the right audience? And then we've also got this big piece that I'm talking to a lot of agencies about, which is around the DMP. Did that ad actually get seen by someone? And when it was clicked, did that actually result in someone going in store or going online?
Nobody clicks ads. What are you talking about? Display,
they all
display advertising. It's branding. It's all about branding.
Yeah, but it's interesting, and so now we're wanting all these clicks, but yet is it actually leading to an outcome? And we've got to trust that when we're buying that advertising and that people are clicking, does that actually mean that it's driving an outcome? And so marketers have got to trust that. So there's multiple layers. I don't think we can just say there's one area where there's distrust.
Amy, have we lost the trust in our the digital ecosystem? Is there any way back for us?
Well, first I thought I'd just introduce myself because it sounds like you guys all know the other panelists. I'm sort of new to the APAC marketplace. I'm headquartered out of Nestle, Switzerland, and I wanted to come and spend some time to learn about the APAC marketplace and expand my knowledge and bring it back to my other zone coworkers. So that's just a little bit about me, and I love, frankly, that there are 3 out of the 5 are women on this stage right now.
See, that's brilliant. But I don't notice this because I'm not like that.
Tech.
I just see women. I just see women as ordinary people. They can do what we do. It's amazing. Who would have guessed it, huh?
I don't know.
Stop.
This is the verification.
Don't get me started on this Manel's rubbish. I've never seen one of those in our show.
All right. So, frankly, I try and keep a little bit of a sense of humor about all this stuff. I think wherever there's criminals and there's money to be made, there's going to be distrust in the system. I mean, this is, not rocket science in that sense. So, where did the distrust come from? I mean, I don't, not trust CNN.com. Not for their news, but for their media.
Hold on, there's a lot of people who do just trust CNN.
No.
That's the BBC. Everybody trusts the BBC.
So, or the BBC.
Except the Irish,
Exactly. It's the ecosystem and the fact that there are literally criminals making money off of my investments. So I'll just leave it there for now.
Okay, we'll come back to that later on. Annie,
Yeah, I think you're right. There's no one cause of this mistrust. I think it's a number of factors, and it can come down to experience. It could be previous brand safety issues, data privacy breaches, perhaps ad fraud or low viewability rates. But I also think that a lot of it is down to lack of transparency across the full value chain. So it seems that the further down the chain you get, the less transparent it becomes. And it's great to see, I know we're going to be touching on it, there are a lot of initiatives that are starting to roll out, but the reality of the landscape in which we actually operate today is it's not fully transparent.
So Dennis, this is a good way to come to you because obviously you're working hard with vendors, with brands, with agencies, with publishers to kind of take these problems on. So let's talk about some of the measures that we're trying to bring into the ecosystem to help resolve problems. Because as I said, there are problems, right? You know, mostly Israeli ad networks. Let's blame the Israeli ad networks. They're always to blame, like, lots of bot traffic, etc. I'm joking, by the way. Good people, Israeli ad networks. But just going back to what you guys are doing, what are you doing working with the industry, and what measures can we put in place to start restoring the trust in the ecosystem?
Yeah, and I think, also just to the prior point, the fact that, well, has anybody here noticed we have a complex ecosystem, right? I think that's part and parcel to why there are trust issues, is that there is so much data, there are so many point solutions, there's so many measurement capabilities, there's so many things that don't exist in other channels, right, in other parts of the media industry. And so it creates an opportunity for distrust. It creates an opportunity, of course, to try to fix that. And we think of transparency as, transparency is not the goal. Transparency is the tool in many ways to get us to trust. And so a lot of what I ran through a few minutes ago is really about just creating more transparency. It starts from the publisher side, where a few years ago something like ads.txt would not have been possible even. I would argue, right, that publishers would not have wanted to disclose all of the sellers that they run through. So I think something like that is an important change. A few years ago, something like open measurement would not have been possible, right? The vendors who enable viewability measurement and verification would not have wanted to band together to create, a single solution that actually can enable that level of common transparency and common connection across the ecosystem. So I think we've gotten to the point where we've stopped denying that there's a problem and moved on to admitting there's a problem and starting to solve it, and that's a good thing, right?
Hold your hand. And
yeah, exactly.
We'll do it together.
Exactly.
Karen, would you not agree though, like to your point around like publishers need to lead the way, but I also think we all need to lead the way. Like there's the buy side responsibility as well. Would you not agree?
Of course. Don't get me started on the buy side.
Yeah.
We could talk about brands and procurement, right? Maybe the brand should have a conversation with the procurement teams and are forcing them to buy crap inventory. Yeah. Or maybe they should pay the agency more money so the agency doesn't work with crappy vendors so the publishers get more money and we're all happier.
You really are on form the other.
Yeah, I am. But we'll get into that later on over beers. I don't want to talk about it now. But yeah, I wasn't specifically talking about publishers. I was talking about the ecosystem as a whole. Measures like, like if you look at Uber, right? Uber are suing their vendors for their app install fiasco, where they basically were buying bot traffic and wasted hundreds of millions allegedly. But you could argue that Uber should take some kind of responsibility because the KPIs they put on that were insane. They're like app installs. There's so much bot traffic around app installs. So I guess that's something for brands to talk about as well. That degree of responsibility. I can't blame brands, but surely there is a lot to be done across the ecosystem.
Yeah, no doubt it takes everyone in the supply chain to make this all work. And I think that's something I actually been thinking about this morning, listening to the other speakers, certainly we need our agencies to be experts. We need our verification vendors to have proven methodology. We need our brands to understand it. But I will tell you that brands are trying to sell coffee and pet food.
And Kit Kats.
And Kit Kats. okay? This is only a one small part of their day.
Because bots don't eat Kit Kats. Your colleague said that once. Gavin, was it Gwen?
Oh, good old Gavin Owen.
Yeah. He's over at Jellyfish now. He's on the other side of it.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, yes, there's some accountability on marketing side, but they need experts internally to know how to speak the language, talk to the agencies, set expectations, put together things like our Nestle Digital Accountability Plan that all of our global vendors, global agencies follow. If we don't set our expectations and know what we want to be successful, then yeah, it certainly can be broken. We're one cog in the wheel.
But I do think it starts, you more than hinted at it, but it starts with setting the right incentives for the agencies, for everyone downstream, and saying, okay, we understand that CPMs may actually increase if we start to get rid of all of this fraud that's been in the ecosystem, or we may understand that some of the volume targets that we've had, or the clicks, may decrease.
No,
right?
clicks are dead.
Right, exactly.
God,
and there's
I
a
hope.
change that's happening here, and I think it's the more sophisticated brands need to kind of pull everything through, whereas publishers, I would argue, have been bearing an unfair share of the work to clean things up right now. Now I think it's a really natural point for brands to, exactly as you said, to say, okay, some of us get it, right? Some of us understand we need to be clear in our requirements.
I think too we have to keep in mind that it's a media mix. Digital is one part of the mix, and that brands are trying to fulfill objectives, right? So a dog food is trying to get registrations for a challenge. That's the objective. So setting the right KPI to fulfill that objective, and if you're going to get specific, if this dog food brand wants to steal share from a competitor, and they know the lifetime value of stealing that consumer to their brand, they're going to be willing to pay a higher CPA to get them to register. So I think it's that kind of education from our agencies and ourselves internally to help them to understand what is the cost they're willing to pay for the value in the long term.
I'd say I feel in Southeast Asia we've got a bit of a balance at the moment where we need to balance the quantity over quality. And I think too much at the moment we're going down the quantity, and that's where it gets pretty nasty. Fraudulent clicks, bad behaviour, and we actually need to go back to the quality. But we do need to pay more for that. Or marketers,
Lanny, is that a case of you doing more conversations with direct publishers, doing the premium publishers? I mean, we talk about the PMP thing this morning, like that's important as well, but are those direct relationships with those publishers important, even more so now because of the quality issue?
Yeah, I think having a direct relationship with publishers is definitely important, but not publishers alone. I think it needs to be combined with technology layer as well. So whether that is tech partners or even the DSPs or the technology that you're actually buying through. And I guess that's also the SSP and the transparency side of it. You have to know that what you're buying is what you say you're buying, or what they say they're providing. So often a relationship's going to help with that, but unless you can have that transparency and be able to report on it and see it, you kind of need that verification.
I guess viewability is a big part of this as well. I mean, that's your bread and butter, isn't it? Like, I'm just playing straight into you here, like, but that is almost part of it as well, because obviously for a long time there was a lot of below the fold buying going on. Publishers were, not publishers, but the ecosystem were selling that into the brands themselves. So that's an important part to show the value of particularly display advertising. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, an ad can't have an impact if it's not in view. It's pretty simple, right? But we still have a long way to go. And the onus is, again, on both sides. The publisher's got to clean up some of the way they structure, try and get some of those more viewable ad units. But then on the buy side, we've also got to reward that. Reward good content, reward good placements. And if we think, even if we just look at the IAB standard, the standard is 50% for display with the ad in view for only 1 second. That's not a lot. So we've got to really work to lift that.
It's enough? No?
It's not enough. No.
If I saw one half of a Kit Kat on an ad, I might buy that Kit Kat.
Yeah.
Because I know there's the rest of the Kit Kat. So there's two, there's 4 biscuits.
Right.
And I might see
right.
2 and I go, there's 2 more above that. I might just go and buy
Yeah.
Kit Kat pack.
So here's the thing.
I want a Kit Kat.
I'm trying to like make it serious again.
I am serious. Oh, I'm not really actually.
Listen, so there's something else that's happening in this space that's really bothering me. And I'm hearing, you come up to me afterward and tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm understanding that this marketplace, the APAC marketplace, there's a lot of impressions I buy that aren't tracked. Because publishers aren't accepting tags, either because they can't or they won't. It's policy. That's a problem. I can't even begin to measure. Maybe 30% of what I buy doesn't get tracked. I don't even know if it's viewable. Not to mention it's site served. Come on.
Spreadsheet at the end
Let's
of the week,
go.
though.
Screenshot of the spreadsheet.
Ad server.
Screenshot.
Yeah. So listen, it should be served with an ad server. It should be taggable to be tracked. It's my understanding there's a lot of markets that have a problem accepting DMP tags. So how are we supposed to do anything in this ecosystem if I can't tag it?
Ladies, do you want to reply to that? Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. That is true. And very, very frustrating. So, I guess it's in the hands of the advertisers to say, well, we're not going to spend with you. We need to see the transparency. We need you to accept the tags. Otherwise, we're not working with you. And that's how we've seen in other markets, we've seen attraction, is by the advertiser just putting their foot down and saying, absolutely no. I need to ensure that that has ran, and to do that, you need to accept this.
Okay, well, we'll have that talk later on. That could be quite interesting. A few people might come talk to you directly. But let's just talk about the ecosystem as a whole, right? Like, there's so many vendors in the middle, like between different sort of categorization, point solutions, etc. The SSP layer, there's hundreds of SSPs, there's hundreds of DSPs, and then we've got all the different data and sort of measurement and all the rest of it. So do you think, for the good of the industry, we might have to have, Dennis, we'll start with you, but do you think we should see will we see some kind of consolidation? And is that necessary to help maybe restore some trust in the ecosystem as well?
I think we certainly are seeing consolidation. I think we're seeing it for a lot of different reasons. And then actually, I would argue identity and privacy are kind of the key driving reasons, and 2 key driving reasons. Others are that there are certain platforms that are obviously more successful than others, and that's another challenge for smaller players. So I think that's happening, but I wouldn't say that we need to see consolidation to increase transparency. I think we need to see an improvement, and I think there has been a significant improvement already in the willingness to work together, to cooperate, to provide the transparency. Kind of a couple of the things I pointed to. Even something like sellers.json is, I know that it sounds boring, but it's SSPs and exchanges being willing to actually declare who they have relationships with. Again, another thing that wouldn't have happened a handful of years ago. And I think it's that, starting down that path that then gives the buy side a whole lot more visibility into, what happened in the path of this transaction. And that's I think we're going in a good direction there. I think there will be more consolidation, but I don't think it's really required to enable more transparency and trust.
Sorry, Annie, go ahead.
Yeah, just jumping in there, I would also say that it's, in a way, that consolidation is almost a buy-side technique, that with the lack of the visibility with some providers, that we will actually use it as a technique to choose our preferred partners, to understand where we can have that level of transparency, where we can have full tracking in place so we can understand where investments are going.
So the things that Dennis is trying to build over IV Tech Lab, does that help you maybe to work with more partners? Because you can easily see then the supply chain like going, this happened after this pub, after that money went there, and these are the people involved in the supply chain, as opposed to what's happening now or did happen previously, where there could be 4 or 5 jumps before the publisher gets any money at all, and people who are not even in the value chain who talk directly to you are below that, and you have no idea.
Yeah, well, it's this so-called ad tech tax that I think gets thrown around quite a lot, but it essentially is when you get to a certain point where you don't know where the breakdown of costs are going or where the margins are being added. And so it makes it very hard to actually assess the true value of what you're buying when you don't have that full visibility across the whole ecosystem. So absolutely the Tech Lab initiatives will help with that, but only when the whole industry is going to adopt it. You talk about fragmentation of markets, especially within APAC. I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges is having not only education for some markets and standardisation across the board, but also needing a high adoption rate in order for it to be successful.
At a really basic level, I heard a good example the other day where an agency brought the client, it was a pitch, brought the client into the agency and showed them all the tools they used and exposed everything. And I think that is going to help because it breeds, where there's distrust or a lack of education, that helps to show, here's how it all works. We're not hiding anything, because I think sometimes there is a thought, there is something hidden there. And that's at a very, very basic level, but I think that's great. It's bringing the client in and showing them how it works.
Amy, have you been brought in by your agency and shown the length and breadth of the ad tech, the beautiful ad tech ecosystem?
Yeah, I think more and more agencies are doing that in their pitch process. And so this is a whole nother conversation, but I think that what we're trying to ensure is the tools that are being pitched are meeting the terms and conditions behind the scenes of our feeling comfortable and safe with these tools, and that we can take a look under the hood if we need to. That's also part of the transparency challenge.
So there's one subject that I never really talked about on stage, and I feel that it feels like it's a dirty little secret of this industry. I mean, listen, it's obvious. You can't do deals in London without it or anywhere else. It's that word rebate. I heard a few people groaning in the crowd there. But there's a you can argue there's an argument made around the transparency flow of money, right, from the brand to the publisher, right? So the brand spends money with the agency, commits money to the agency. The remuneration is very, very much a small remuneration these days. It's kind of being pushed and pushed down all the time. And then the agency makes the rest of its margin through rebates or whatever else you want to call it. I don't know how agency would describe it, consultancy or something else. And then that has a knock-on effect because, this is going to shock people, but despite, I've been covering this market for 10 years, right? And the IO market in London is as strong as it ever was since I started writing. So the IO market is actually growing in the UK. So the actual campaigns are executed programmatically through DSPs, but the business transaction is IO based. So I'm just trying to figure out, are we going to see a change in the relationship between agencies and brands as part of this transparency model? I know it's loosely related, but it still has a massive effect on the supply chain. But is there going to be a change in the business model between brands and agencies to kind of, I wouldn't say root out this problem because it's just been part of the ecosystem for many years, but sort of redress it or address it?
I think it's already happening. I think we have a lot of sit-down conversations with our agency partners. I mean, we work with 3 or 4 of the major holding companies in the world, and it's about designing the terms and conditions that everyone is comfortable with on both sides, and that you get what you pay for. So we're certainly examining how we remunerate our agencies, but frankly, it's a tough spot because the system is broken. So how do I know that, hidden rebates aren't still going to happen even if I fix remuneration? So it's going to be a process, but frankly, every advertiser on the globe has a rebate refund process that we go through when working with our agencies on a by channel basis. So it's happening. Maybe just people aren't aware of it.
Lonnie, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're doing the agency person here. You don't have to go into any detail because I know it's a difficult subject. I'm sorry about that. But we'll talk about remuneration. That's an important part, right? So, like, should agencies move to performance basis to sort of show if we spend this, we can actually achieve that and get closer relationships with the agency, with the marketer. So the relationship changes between them. They get closer, more embedded with each other, and their goals are sort of aligned.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily about a rebate or a passing on, or taking that cost, or essentially passing it on to the advertiser as well. I think there are different ways to look at it, and we are already, as you mentioned, already starting to see that change, whether it is more performance models or a certain level of guarantee that we can put in place by using data or using previous experience. Where it's about coming up almost with a bespoke solution for the clients based on their contracts and what's going to work for them.
That was a good answer. I put you in the spot there. I'd hire you. You're good.
Thank you.
Laura, do you have to say?
We don't do rebates.
Yeah, right.
Just put that out there. But no, I mean, it's no surprise, right? Like, agencies have been squeezed and squeezed for so long now, and they've got to make their margin. But every agency is different. I don't think we can tarnish them with the same brush. But London, absolutely, you can get many jollies there.
It's not just London, hey. Don't be tarnishing London with the same brush, like, you know. So that leaves us back to this SPO, right? The rise of demand path optimization and supply path optimization. Is this a fix for the current system? I know you've been building tools to help with that, but is that going to help us sort of, that could be a big step for us to kind of figure out the way the money should flow as opposed to what it's flowing at the minute?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly not attaching financial details. They're not included in the specs that we've introduced, but like sellers.json, for example. But I do think that just having knowledge of that flow, exactly as you said, of the sellers involved in a transaction, will change the nature of real-time decisions. If you see a transaction come to you that has 14 sellers attached to it, you might go, right, I'm not sure I want to buy that, right? Or you might audit after the fact and discover a lot of opportunity to change who you buy from, who you partner with, just looking at how transactions have flowed. So I think that's a huge opportunity. I think the changes in data and privacy and transparency and control around data and privacy and the consumer engagement there is very disruptive, as we've heard about many times today. And I think will also actually invite very different conversations between agencies and brands in who plays what role, whose data is used where, how, what third-party data is included, what identifiers are included. There's just a lot of the tech side actually right now that is increasingly playing a role, I believe, in business decisions and in policy, and it's just very much a back and forth right now, and how we try to evolve the tech to keep up with policy and vice versa.
Amy, that must be exciting, though. The fact that you can see what's going on there, like, I know, it kind of, you can actually visualize where that money is going and who's involved, and it makes you probably a bit more confident about the space as opposed to previous.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when sometimes though when you ask for transparency and you get it, you're like, okay, now what?
You want more?
Because I mean, frankly, even testing blockchain in the U.S., even the U.S. teams are asking, so what do I do with this knowledge now? what do I need an economist to tell me how to look at who gets paid what and why should they get paid what they get paid? So it's open, right? When you suddenly have more data, now it opens new conversations and things that we have to figure out. It's not a bad thing. It's just a new thing to figure out.
And I think that's what has the potential to change the relationship, right, with the agency as everybody gets a little bit more educated, as everybody can see more of the same, information about what's happening.
And when do brands start asking the same questions of TV? I mean, let's be honest, nobody's watching terrestrial TV at the minute, and they're getting the bulk of the budget. Why are they not getting slapped over the wrists over this?
Well, I'll tell you, marketing mix modeling shows that TV and print still works.
Yeah, we don't know about that.
Sometimes over $3 in ROI. So,
I'm not going to argue with you.
Then we have to start getting into modeling and that whole world. So yeah, it's though it is a big influencer, I will tell you.
Ladies, what about, just quickly, because actually we've run out of time, but Lanny, what do you think about the demand path or supply path optimization? That must be a real boon for visibility from your side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's at the moment a necessity and something that is definitely part of an agency's approach. Sometimes you can, too much information is sometimes difficult to deal with, and obviously it is an acquired skill set and also very time intensive, but it is important to have it, but it really does need to be a unified approach. At the end of the day, buy side shouldn't be having to clean up the supply should be clean to start with. So a bit of a unified approach is needed for that.
Laura, the more viewability the better, says you, huh?
Yeah, go for it and get all the viewable inventory.
Yeah.
Actually, you can only probably get half, so half the room can get viewable inventory.
You just said 30% because you just told me only 30% are tagged up with tags.
No, I mean, there is that issue. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, helping clean up is obviously something that plays perfectly in the space of verification. So ensuring that you can have those qualified ads, we call them qualified ads, viewable, fraud-free, brand safe. You're right, it's got to come from the buy side, but there's also needs to be some sell side responsibility there. I would agree with that. But we all need to work towards the quality because we want people to continue to invest in digital and trust in digital. And so if we don't clean it up, then we risk that.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. A round of applause for our fantastic panel. Thank you.